What is a monster? Is it a vehicle for peril and wonder? Is it a gateway to world building? A problem to solve? Something to punch? Or is it a little box with some numbers and text scrawled within its borders? You see, there is a new monster manual out for the game Dungeons & Dragons, and they've made some changes. Some that might seem a bit small, but I believe they may have harrowing consequences. So I believe it my duty to you to spotlight a few of these changes and the implications they may have towards you and anyone who dares play Dungeons & Dragons wielding them. Because that's what they are. Things to wield. The Commoner. Ah, yes. Arguably the least monstrous in all the monsters in this manual, the noble, ordinary fellow. In fact, some might look upon the 2014 stat block for the Commoner and see it as the definition of ordinary. Each stat a 10, neither adding nor subtracting to this woesome wanderer's skills or capabilities. It not only acts as a gentle reminder to the Dungeon Master that even a level 1 adventurer far surpasses the capabilities of the average citizen, it speaks to a wider mundanity to the non-adventuring folk of the realm, and a lack of individuality amongst the masses. The 2025 Commoner comes with one new trait: training. Each Commoner gets to be proficient in one skill, and can make ability checks with that skill at advantage. And suddenly, like rays of sun breaching the cold morning sky, seeds of individuality are planted in each and every denizen of your land. By giving each and every Commoner a skill, we give them a history. A civil servant with training in deception has a very different past than one with training in insight or performance. These small details spark small questions, and small questions spark stories. This is a good change. Not only does it add depth and personality to the denizens of your world, it gives the Dungeon Master a very simple and effective manner through which to express that mechanically. Nice. Modrons. Wonder is not hard to come by in fantasy realms, but when hydras and memphits are the norm, unusual is a much steeper slope to navigate. Modrons, in many ways, are an effective way of navigating that slope, but also in many ways, they are super boring and the stat block's not great. In fact, when we look upon the 2014 stat block, there are just a few winks and nods to how genuinely unusual these fleshy geometric gentlemen just are. Modrons come from Mechanus, the realm of pure order, and they are bound by that order. And this stat block represents the unrelenting order of these creatures mechanically through two features: True Sight and Axiomatic Mind. True Sight is fairly straightforward. They can see through illusions, any magical means of disguise, and generally through anything that may conceal something as it truly is. Modrons see things only exactly as they are. Axiomatic Mind is a bit more fidgety. It states that a Modron cannot be compelled to act in a manner contrary to its nature or instructions. What does that mean? A fair question. It means that it is completely outside of the capabilities of your adventurers to alter a Modron's goals or intended actions, socially, magically, or by any other way. Their nature is as stubborn and precise as a sober watchmaker. The 2025 Modron comes with a few stark changes. The first being the nature of its attacks. The names reference gears now, and the damage has been changed to force. This minor change could be a most delectable cream cheese icing atop a wonderfully moist homemade carrot cake, if not for the egregiousness of the second change. A change that scooped out the once delectable cake's innards and replaced them with a dry, crumbling, mass-produced, freezer-burnt dessert substitute. They removed Axiomatic Mind and replaced it with immunity to the Charmed condition. This creature is now immune to any magic that would charm it. And that's all. This is not a mind bound by order. This is just a guy that you need to talk to convince him of stuff. You know, like regular people. Axiomatic Mind may have been a bit complicated to grasp, but this change doesn't just simplify it into something a bit more streamlined. It changes the Modron from a creature for whom order is burned into its very synapses to a creature that you can't magically mind control. I do not like this change. It takes a rather unique tool away from the Dungeon Master and replaces it with one that gives them absolutely no insight into how to make a Modron feel uniquely like a Modron. Let me tell you about something that already has made my life much better. The sponsor of this video, Raycon. I've actually been using Raycon everyday earbuds for a while now. Their lightweight ergonomic design means they sit comfortably in my ear, and I have no fear of them falling out, so I can listen to exactly whatever music I want to listen to when the shadow beasts from beyond the veil decide the hunt is on. They've got a 32-hour battery life, which is great for when I want to listen to audiobooks on longer adventures, or if I just forget to charge it for a while. With their noise isolation feature, I can find peace even amongst the wails of the doomed. Alternatively, with awareness mode, my senses are heightened and I'm ready for surprises at every turn. Just check out this protective case. They've got a bunch of different colors and designs. I went with Galaxy because it kind of reminds me of my family and I want to, express my heritage. Not only do these support wireless charging, they just feel really nice. I don't know what dark alchemy produced this texture, but I want more of it in my life. Hey, you want to know something crazy? Even though they rival the biggest names in premium audio, Raycon start off at just half the price of the other guys. That's not even the craziest part, because it is time to save big. You can go to buyraycon.com/cinder and save up to 20% on everyday earbuds by clicking the link that is in the video description below. You are also supporting me. Do you want to support me? Check it out while you can. It's special, like you. The Kenku. Behold this cursed wretch of a bird, damned by some long-forgotten god to wander the realm flightless and with no voice of their own. Kenku carry with them not just the weight of their ancestors' folly, but the consequences of a vindictive power. For what avian creature seeks anything more than the skies and the sound of their own song? In the 2014 Monster Manual, the Kenku has two unique features. The most characterizing of the two is mimicry. You see, Kenku have no voice of their own, but they can mimic any sounds they hear, including the voices of others. A benign Dungeon Master might see this as an opportunity for a humorous social interaction, or perhaps an opportunity to use an audio recording assistance tool for a bit of goof and gaff. But I'm sure the more impish of you see the opportunities for beguilement and manipulation. This darker inspiration is, if anything, supported by the Kenku's second unique feature, Ambusher. It makes you wonder if the designers of this monster are in fact in agreement with the wrathful god that cursed the Kenku so long ago, because they have forged within this stat block the inclination that Kenku excel at dishonorable combat. When a people set upon a dark path are given only dark tools, can they really be blamed for acts of darkness? The 2025 Kenku does away with Ambusher, replacing it with two very different interpretations of darkness. Less moral, more literal. The utterly forgettable short sword and short bow of the 2014 iteration have been replaced with a shadow blade. Mechanically, the two are almost identical. They both deal 1d6 plus 3 damage, and they both offer opportunities for melee and ranged combat. but they are different in two very evocative and occasionally mechanically relevant ways. The blade now deals necrotic damage instead of slashing damage. The blade magically returns to the Kenku's hand once they have thrown it. The damage type changing will be more or less relevant depending on what damage resistances your adventurers have access to. This shadow-wielding Kenku will be much more trouble for your barbarian, but much less for your Azumar. Really though, the change is in the feel. What is implied when a bunch of sword and bow-wielding bird people attack you? Almost nothing. But if those very same bird people come at you not with bow and blade, but with wisps of shadow, well, that implies some pretty cool magic stuff. It implies that these are no ordinary bird people bandits. It implies that they have in fact been touched by darkness. It tells the story without exactly telling the story. This change the damage type is also one you can do from your own home. How about a goblin that does cold damage? Or an ogre that does psychic damage? Ooh, what paths may they have walked before today? Kenku also gets a new ability called Eldritch Lantern, which is an incredibly cool name for a feature that just lets them cast a spell. Unfortunately, the new monster manual does this a lot. It's a good spell, don't get me wrong, Fairy Fire, very nice. And it does make them more dynamic in combat as well as a more interesting ally if your adventurers find themselves on the same side. But if you're going to call something Eldritch Lantern, surely we can come up with something a little bit more bespoke for it to do than just Fairy Fire. Did you feel the need to change the name of the ability from Fairy Fire to something else because you were worried the average reader might associate the Kenku with the fairy people if they had an ability called Fairy Fire? You know, a lot of features I've found in the book have seemed to be going in the direction of simplify and streamline, but good glory does that dance very close to make dumb. But tangential thoughts on implied perceptions designers may have on their audiences aside, this is a very good new stat block. I like it. Let me tell you a story. An old acquaintance from my collegiate years reached out and inquired if I would be willing to run a game of Dungeons & Dragons for her and her old friends. This was their first adventure, and while there were many memorable moments along the way, I'm sure, the one that sticks out in my mind the most is when they did battle with a regiment of animated armor. The 2014 animated armor has two very interesting features. The first is false appearance. False appearance actually makes a showing in many monsters in the 2014 Monster Manual, and it allowed creatures to hide very well in the right circumstances, regardless of whether or not they were actually good at stealth or had a high dexterity. A roper may be confused with a stalactite or mite, depending on its placement. A gargoyle may be confused for, well, a gargoyle. And in this circumstance, a suit of animated armor, while remain motionless, would be indistinguishable from an ordinary suit of armor. It's a lovely feature, one that really encourages dungeon masters to come up with more cinematic moments, and while I do think it is greatly impactful on the quality of the stat block, for the story I'm telling it's quite irrelevant. No. The relevant feature is anti-magic susceptibility. Put that on a toaster and spell it backwards. As the name suggests, the feature gives creatures a susceptibility to anti-magic, such as being within an anti-magic field or being the target of a dispel magic spell. If you're familiar with D&D, you would know that the spell Dispel Magic normally really only shuts down the effects of spells. In fact, the wording of the spell itself says it ends spell effects. It does not say that it ends any magical effects. But my players were not very familiar with D&D. This was, after all, their first campaign. And the spellcaster wasn't thinking of the exact wording of the spell in that moment. She was thinking, this is a spell that disrupts magic. These are creatures awakened through magic. So through no knowledge or logic outside of the game world we were all playing in, she decided to cast Dispel Magic on the animated armor. And since the anti-magic susceptibility feature tells you exactly what happens when something like that happens, I didn't have to think about it. It just happened, and it just worked. Not only did she get to feel the rewards of being quite clever, it was as if the designers of the game knew that when an adventurer saw an animated object, they might think to themselves, huh, that seems pretty dang magical, I should try disrupting that magic. So they built the mechanics there to uplift conclusion that a player would come to. Now, let's take a look at the 2025 animated armor, shall we? No false appearance. No anti-magic susceptibility. What does it have? It has the armor class of a creature wearing heavy armor. It has a lot of immunities. It has blindside? Okay. What makes this different than like a little rock golem guy? When I think animated armor, my first thought isn't a bunch of immunities and blindsight. This stat block is absolutely void of personality. It has no luster. It has no grace. And what's worst of all, it is not alone. Remember that roper that I mentioned earlier? Yeah, check it out. No false appearance there, baby. Instead, it gets +5 to stealth. That's right. The new roper is just as good at hiding in a ballroom as it is in a cave system. +5 to stealth either way. Why? Why did they get rid of false appearance? Simplicity's sake? Streamlining? Making things easier to understand? Look, I get it. When you order wings, you get a couple orders of milds for the kids, but that doesn't mean you wash them in the sink before you feed your family. They can take a little heat. The world is full of heat. And sure, you can shield them from it for a little while, but eventually they're going to need to learn to get burned so they can grow, so they can improve. Oh, and before you check, yes, anything that used to have anti-magic susceptibility no longer has it. What's it replaced with? Nothing. It's a dead feature. Patched out. Wizards, I know you. In many ways, I am you. I see the work you do. I see how well formatted these new books are. I see how evocative and fantastic the art is. No longer do monsters just sit in the void. Every piece of art shows the monster living its life, doing what it does, giving inspiration to those that look upon it. I see how desperately you want this game to be approachable to new people. But don't simplify to the point of losing the magic. Or in this case, the anti-magic. I must admit there is a darker side to this. Part of me wonders if all of these oversimplifications of interesting and nuanced features into simple bonuses or simple immunities comes not from a design perspective of let's make the game more fun, but from a programmer's perspective of let's make these features easier for a computer to keep track of. Not for your or my benefit, but for the benefit of paying for some virtual tabletop or AI dungeon master in the future. I hope that is not what is driving the design of these new monsters. I really do. I would love for there to be no ulterior motive and hope that the people behind this that really put the work in may have just jumped the shark in terms of what is needed to simplify. But either way, simplification is good to a point. If it's too much, everything becomes lukewarm water mush. I do not like this new animated armor. I do not like the changes that I see within it echoing throughout this new book. There are many things that this new monster manual appears to be doing rather well. Quite a few that I enjoy and will almost certainly be implementing into my own games immediately. But there are also quite a few that muddy the waters and imply a design direction that I really hope we are not taking. The magic of these games is not the part that fits in a video game. They are the things that fit within our hearts and our butts. Oh my god, I can't believe I did this stupid voice for the whole video. False appearance. Anti-magic susceptibility. You may be gone, but you are not forgotten. Okay, I think I'm done with the voice now. Why did you... Hey, Cinder, why did you do a whole voice in a weird British accent? Hey, why didn't you turn your light on, huh? How about that? Why'd you just have your background lights on the whole time, huh? Do you think that added to the ambiance? Think people think that was cool? I guess it's funny. I mean, I think it's funny. If they don't think it's funny, who cares?